As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Again, Pilate asked him, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus was silent and gave no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now there was a man called Barabbas, who was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Pilate asked them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" You see, he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd for him to release Barabbas for them instead. So Pilate asked them, "So what do you want me to do with the man you call king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" They shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they gathered together the whole cohort. They dressed him in a purple robe, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They began saluting him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and struck his head with a reed and knelt down in homage to him. "Hail, King!" After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak, put his own clothes on him, and then they led him out to crucify him. Just a few comments about this section of our Passion story. Some years ago, you probably remember Mel Gibson came out with that movie, The Passion of the Christ, and he claimed that he was trying to make as biblically and historically accurate a film as he could. The problem is that the movie that he made was very unbiblical. It was unbiblical in the way in which he portrayed the crucifixion of Jesus and those final few days. He accentuated and with great detail laid out the violence of flogging and the crucifixion and the spitting and the beating and all of that. But the biblical writers, we must notice, the biblical writers, they don't cover it over, but it is muted. The violence is muted in the biblical story. It simply says, "And after flogging him, he handed him over to be crucified." Tomorrow we'll hear, "And they crucified him." It's just two words in the Greek text. And so what we see is this muting of the violence itself. And trust me, the biblical writers know how to tell a physically violent and gory scene. They know how to do that. We have much evidence for that. But these writers choose to mute the violence and instead emphasize other elements of the story, of the Passion narrative. They emphasize the plot against Jesus. They emphasize the betrayal. They emphasize the betrayal by Judas. They emphasize the fleeing and deserting by the disciples. They emphasize Peter's denial They emphasize the mocking by the chief priests, by the soldiers, and others. They emphasize the assassination by the Romans. They emphasize the trumped-up charges by the religious authorities of the day. Those are the elements that are highlighted and emphasized and told with much greater detail compared to the violence of the story. I don't mean to make a big deal of this, but sometimes our writers, sometimes our commentators want to really emphasize the violence and the brutality. But the biblical writers don't do that. The biblical writers emphasize those elements of relationship, of political power, of domination, of religious leaders who have gone astray, who have abandoned their call to faith, to courage, to love, to compassion. So we want to keep these elements in mind and reflect not so much on the violence, but on the other human experience that we experience in our own daily lives, in our world, in our companies, in our neighborhoods, with our politicians, even to this very day. So my friends, it's a deep, deep story, and it's very, very powerful. And I pray, that we continue to have hearts of courage, of faith, which means courageous trust, and hearts of deep compassion and love for the journey of Jesus, the story of his love and selfless giving, and the grace that Jesus and his Father, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the grace that they bestow on us this day. Thank you for listening once again. We'll be back again tomorrow with the crucifixion and the burial of Jesus to conclude Mark's Passion narrative. Thank you.